Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar brought to you by Bursa Malaysia and managed by our company LifeChamp. So this is Shen Chu. I'm the moderator for these sessions. So how is everybody doing? I see many of you here say good morning, good evening to us. So yes, welcome to this session. So today we are going to do revisiting automotive electronics. Yeah, many of you here still say doing excellent. Okay, thank you so much. So today we are going to look into automotive electronics. Now, as you know, cars were more mechanical in the past, but but recently all cars are made more powerful with more electronic components in it. Okay, our cars are more electronic, and in Bursa Malaysia we have a lot of companies. Okay, is involved in the supply chain of automotive electronics. And today, our speaker, David Poh, will go through some of the case studies of these companies so you know what they do and what are the potential. All right. So, disclaimer as usual, this webinar is only for educational purpose. So in no way that we give any recommendation to buy or any recommendation to sell any company. So in the event that we cover this company, is only for educational purpose. So if you decide to make any investment decision, you are 100% responsible for all your investment decisions. Is that okay? So allow me to introduce our speaker today. He is none other than David Poh. Okay, he has been very welcomed by all participants on this Bursa webinar. Everybody always give him a great reviews. Okay, at the survey. So yeah, David is an engineer by training. He began his career as an engineer in the telco industry for 10 years before turning to his passion in value investing. So he is now a full-time investor and dedicates his time and resources to nurture the youth in financial literacy. So he is often invited to speak in brokers' seminars, webinars, as well as other Bursa endorsed events, and his professional comments and opinions on value investing are featured in business publications like Focus Malaysia. Now, David also provides consultation services in value investing and advanced portfolio strategies for high net worth individuals. So now he is the founder of Spiral Thinker Group, which is a collaborative alliance to promote intelligent value investing and develop algorithm-based adaptive portfolio strategy for sustainable long-term wealth creation. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is David Poh. So, without further ado, let me hand over the session to David. David, how are you? Yeah, you are muted. David, you are muted.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, not enough coffee, perhaps. Thanks again, Shane.
I will cut your profile short because you asked me not to go through your full-length profile.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for that. Give more time for case studies, yeah? Now, can you enable the screen sharing for me, please?
Yes.
All right, cool. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. It's good to be back. As always, this is anything to do with semiconductor electronics is a very hot topic. So I just got to know from Shane that there are more than 1,300 registrations tonight. Okay. And, I have been doing this for quite some time with LifeChamp and Bursa. So I thought maybe I want to change things a little bit to make things more interesting so that everyone here can benefit. So I told Shane, hey, Shane, maybe I need to tune down a little bit on the introduction. Less story, but more case studies. Yeah. And then he said, oh, great, right? I think can attract more participants and the participants will benefit a lot. So tonight, as I promised, there are perhaps at least 3 case studies, right? On companies that are involved in automotive electronics listed in Bursa Malaysia. So in front of you here, as you can see, they are basically, before we talk about case studies, so I'm going to bring you through the automotive electronics, the current issues and trends. Then I want to talk a little bit about this thing called the NEV, or the new energy vehicles, which is actually not a new thing, but something that is going to be a very important project, all right, that will drive, the automotive electronics in the years to come. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to go through a lot of these fundamentals or background about automotive electronics. If you'd like to know more, please head on to LifeChamp's website or YouTube channel to look for the topic on automotive electronics. I think it was last year, either October or November. Yeah. All right. So without further ado, let's start with, what are the key issues that is, hampering around the electronics, specifically the automotive electronics sector. Yeah. So I'm going to skip this. This is what we shared last time. So, as you all know, lately, I think as long as you are invested in Bursa Malaysia, particularly if you have any semiconductor or technology stocks in your portfolio, you will know that one of the key issues that we're facing right now is shortage of chips, right? Chips generally means semiconductor, these ICs, so on and so forth. And there's such a thing called the core shortage type right now, which is disrupting across the entire supply chain of the semiconductor. And it is not caused by one single thing, but it is a confluence of events that happen. And it is like so tense. Then COVID happened, right? And basically it aggravated the whole thing, and the whole situation spiraled into what we are going through today. But let's take a few steps back down memory lane and look at what happened before to trigger all this semiconductor shortage or chip shortage. So I'm going to show you a picture. Then for some of you may say, what's happening, right? So let me just do this yet. Yeah. Okay. So do you see this picture in front of you beside your CPU chip? Yeah, it's none other than Ajinomoto. Uncle Roger's favorite umami flavor ingredient, right? Yeah. So you might be thinking, hey, David, am I in the right webinar? What has Ajinomoto has to do with semiconductor even, let alone the supply chain shortage, right? Well, actually, Ajinomoto, the company, not Ajinomoto in Malaysia, but the original company in Japan has a lot to do with the current shortage issue. And you have to understand that, you have to go all the way back to the 1990s. In the 1990s, Ajinomoto, because they can only have one. They have only one product, which is Ajinomoto, the MSG, monosodium glutamate. So they wanted to diversify their business into other segments, in order to survive, right? So they ventured into a lot of different industries, and one of them is actually electronics. So I think a group of the engineers, what they did was they did a lot of experiment about mixing chemical compounds with this epoxy resin, so on and so forth, of these plastic compounds, right? And then to cut the story short, they discovered, they invented this thing called ABF, which stands for Ajinomoto Built Out Film. All right. Now, what is a built out film? What is ABF? So you have to imagine a chip, right? Okay, like your Intel chip, which is shown in front of you here. Now, in the chip, is a package could be as big as this or small as this, right? It doesn't mean that all of this package is full of the IC, or what we call the die, the wafer chip. In fact, the wafer chip is just a very small, perhaps could be 1 by 1 mm by 1 mm, or roughly around there. But what is in between this die, as you can see from here, to the package, and then which is connected to the PCB, right, are layers and layers and layers of micro circuit boards. And these micro circuit boards, in between them, they have a lot of thin layers of what we call substrates. Now, these substrates, one of the core function is to insulate the electricity from the upper layer to the lower layer. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of electrical shock or interference, right? So you can imagine the importance of this, what we call the substrate. Now, previously, before the ABF came about, one of the major items used for substrates are ink, right? So it's basically industrial ink meant specifically for electronic components. So what they did was they will inject ink into this middle layer and wait for it to dry. But as you know, ink has a lot of problem, right? Number one, you need to dry. And number two, because ink is liquid, there may be some bubbles in between that will actually cause a lot of problem and reduce the efficiency of your chips, right? So when ABF came about, it was a revolutionary invention, right? And I think Intel was one of the companies that started using this in a big way. So fast forward to today, right? As chips, and by the way, this is a very old design. So chips today doesn't really look like this. In fact, now we flip chip with VGA and so much advanced packaging, right? The chip is getting thinner and thinner and smaller. That is why our devices are getting thinner and thinner as well, like your smartphones. Imagine the smartphones in the 90s, right? So bulky and so heavy, right? And how come now the smartphones or other smart devices are so thin and so light, but they're packed with so much power, computing power? It's because of all this miniaturization of these computing chips. So as you can see from here, from advanced packaging, I talked about this in the previous webinar, of VGA to CSP, chip scale packaging to the future colors package, right? You can see that it's getting thinner and thinner, which means that the film, the substrate, right, needs to be made of more advanced material that also can support the thin layer as well. Okay, now the ABF substrate shortage actually has been around for quite some time. I think as early as 2018 or 19, there already are some signs of shortages. And by the way, this substrate is monopolized by Ajinomoto, this company, right? You may be wondering, how come the Chinese can't do it, right? So I'm sure sometime in the future, somebody will come up with a better product, with a better substrate replacement alternative. Right, but right now, all the electronics components, the chips, the whatever this semiconductor you are using, right, most of them will use this ABF as a substrate, as the main substrate. Okay, so currently, one of the bottleneck is actually because of the shortage of this ABF. All right, and I think a lot of articles are predicting, that this shortage may last all the way until 2023. But then you may be asking, hey, David, is this the only one? Cannot be, right? Yeah, actually, we cannot pinpoint the entire issue right now to one single player, right? In fact, there are a lot of other issues as well. And one of them, the other main issue is actually the shortage of wafers as well. Now, as you can see, the biggest wafer foundry is actually TSMC. A lot of foundries before this, their production is actually to produce 8-inch wafers. But because of a lot of advancement in technology, in inventions, and these better ways to make wafers, right? They actually venture into 12-inch. Now, 8-inch, imagine like a disc, right? Because it's round. From 8-inch to 12-inch, that's 50% capacity, extra capacity. Now, of course, as a businessman, you'll be thinking, right, hey, if I want to build my next capacity to make more wafers, right, would I put more money to build more 8-inch wafer machines or 12-inch? Think about it. Logical, right? Of course, as a businessman, I want to go for 12-inch. Why? Number one, I can sell more because it's 50% extra in terms of the size. And secondly, I would say the ASP, the average selling price for 12-inch wafers are much more lucrative than 8-inch wafer, which means it's more profitable. And that is one of the reasons drove the underinvestment of the 8-inch capacity in many years before the pandemic hit, right? And as you can see here, of course, not a lot of these semiconductor components will require advanced 12-inch wafers. In fact, most of them started with 8-inch wafers. And then even right now, even MEMS, these bipolar CMOS, DMOS, power chips, high voltage regulators chips, even sensors, right? They're still using a lot of 8-inch wafer. Now, what happened then, right? So you think first you have to imagine there's underinvestment and the 8-inch wafer are getting, the capacity, there are not many new capacities going around because a lot of money is being poured into the 12-inch wafers. Then pandemic hit in 2020. Now, what happened was, because pandemic hit, the whole world was in lockdown. Nobody can buy cars, right? Because there's no cars on the roads. So if you are an automotive a businessman, right, you produce cars, right? What would you do? You shut down, right? Now, when you shut down, what happens is all the inventory, you have a lot, so you stop all your orders. So whatever orders you have, you said, no, I cannot take anymore because I'm not producing. All right. Now, what happened at the same time is because of the lockdown effect, a lot of people are working from home. So the demand for consumer devices like your laptops, smartphones, computers, all sorts of consumer devices skyrocketed. And that creates a lot of demand for the semiconductor to supply to these consumer devices, OEMs or OBMs. So what happened there was, a lot of this capacity shifted. All this idle capacity shifted to supply to all these consumer devices segments. All right. Then eventually, when the world start to normalize and people start to the economy start to reopen slowly, demand for automotive start to come back. Now the automotive guys come back to the wafer foundry, the chip maker say, "Hey, I need these now." Then the chip maker says, "Sorry, my capacity are already fully booked because I can't even cope with the demand from people like Apple, people like Samsung, people like Huawei, So what happened? This created, it is like a perfect storm, And fast forward, that is what is happening today. That's why a lot of automotive makers are scrambling for these chips, When you talk about automotive, don't think too much, don't think too far. Just even the conventional cars today, if you buy a car today, right now, the electronics component are much more higher, denser than the cars that you bought 5-10 years ago. All right, you don't even have to be a very advanced, you don't even have to be electric vehicle. The conventional cars today has a lot of electronic components already. Yeah. Then on top of that, as you can see from the headlines here, there are fire strikes in the MLCC. If you remember from our previous webinar, right? MLCC is one of the major components, the passive components for automotive electronics. Then we've got Texas winter storm. Wow, so many bad news. Striking, forcing the plants to close down in Texas. And Texas is a home to many semiconductor players like NXP, Samsung, so on and so forth. And to make things worse, in Japan, then there are another fire that hit Renesas. And if you remember well, Renesas is also one of the key players of semiconductor electronics. Yeah. So all this put together is a perfect storm, that to lead to what we are facing today, the semiconductor supply crunch, the shortage, just now as I mentioned, the core shortage type. Okay, and because of that, as you know, Americans, they love their cars, they love their big trucks, and automotive is a huge industry in US. So of course, having a new president on board as well, he cannot let this spiral out of control, right? Because he has to look good on his report card, especially his first 100-day report, so on and so forth, right? So they started, showing the muscles, say, hey, they started to use diplomatic, to put it in a very nice way, they started to use their leverage on their diplomatic ties to incentivize, the foundry to actually, what do you call, allocate more capacity to do automotive chips, right? So that is why, Taiwan ministry says, okay, all right, TSMC will prioritize automotive chips if possible. Now, why is this so important? Because it's not really about loss, but the opportunity cost, the opportunity loss. One of the statistics by IHS Markit, I think this is recently, they found out that actually the shortage this is not shortage, this is the estimated value of output losses. Meaning, because of this shortage, a lot of car makers cannot produce enough cars. In fact, some of them need to shut down, I'm sure you have heard a lot of these stories that I think Ford or then Volkswagen shutting down the plant temporarily because of lack of electronics components, right? Because of these, now a lot of industries will actually suffer output losses, meaning that either the capacity, the productivity is being idle. They cannot produce, they cannot sell. So among the household goods, among the technology equipment, among the automotive and parts, you can see that actually the automotive is hit the most, because like it or not, as I mentioned before, the household good like your TVs, your consumer devices, they pre-book already, because during the pandemic, the demand for these rose, so they pre-book a lot of this capacity forward. So they are pretty much okay, but the automotive players, they were left behind, all right, because they stop they stop production. That's why their potential output losses is much higher. Now, of course, the Biden administration won't allow this. They'll try their best to actually look for capacity. Now, what's going to happen after this is I believe the Biden administration, the Americans would realize and wake up that actually, we cannot rely on other people, let alone one single major producer to supply, to give us a supply of these core technology components that we really need. So I believe Biden, the administration will, I think you have read already, they actually poured a lot of money, a lot of capital back in America, the land of America, to actually rejuvenate, to incentivize the local players to actually to expand this, including the wafer foundries, including the IDMs, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And the interesting thing about, especially for automotive, is actually automotive electronics is not so simple. In fact, there are multiple modules and multiple multitude of functions of the electronics components, right? From the cases of body cases to safety components to infotainment to powertrain, and of course to autonomous driving, right? Or what we call the ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance System, right? So if I may, just to give you an idea how complex it is, right? The classification of automotive semiconductors include things like sensors, you've got magnetic sensors, pressure sensors, radar, power flow. Power flow is very important because it's, especially you have powertrain, you need to measure how power is being transferred from the engine to the other parts of the car, right? So all these sensors are very important. Then we've got safety sensors as well, because the car need to make sense of the environment. Then we've got other components like MCU, we've got embedded power ICs, we've got the programmable SoCs from players like Cypress. This Trevor is by Cypress. Then we've got other MCUs by this company called Infineon. They have this thing called the Oryx. You've got other power management chips like the MOSFET, power switching components, power management modules, the IGBT regulators, so on and so forth. You've got memories, you've got connectivity in terms of USB, in terms of wireless like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or even Bluetooth low energy, so on and so forth. It's so complex, right? So that is why it is becoming, and all of this, it is a chip, it is a semiconductor. So number one, they'll come from wafers. So I've got wafer shortage, and in the production process, you need a substrate. So the ABF is in shortage. So all this led to what is happening today, as you can see here, right? And that is what we call the core shortage time. Yeah. And so bad things aside, if you ask me, I'm sure there'll be some questions later. Is this going to break the entire semiconductor value chain? Or how long is this going to end? How long is it going to last? To tell the truth, I have discussed this. I have interviewed quite a few CEOs in Malaysia that does involved in this electronic sector. So most of them, I would say, the general feeling is that it is not going to last forever. In fact, a lot of things are being done. Like just now I talked about 12-inch, right? Actually, this 12-inch, because the new capacity is just being put online. So eventually it will alleviate a lot of these bottlenecks. And I think recently you also learned that the Global Foundries is setting up a 1 billion, was it Sing dollar, US dollar? I can't remember, new foundry capacity in Singapore. All right, so they will eventually alleviate these shortage issues, and on top of that, actually, I think the industry is also learning along the curve, so they should be able to manage the situation better. Now, if this, then the other question you may have is, hey, this is going to be bad for a lot of semiconductor players, right? Actually, I beg to differ. In fact, this is a great opportunity. Now, as I mentioned just now, so I'm going to answer the projected Q&A later, yeah, Shane. Because of a lot of capacities coming online from the wafer foundries, right? You have to imagine the whole process, And there are more and more new wafers being produced by this new capacity, new plants, right? So it will flow down through the value chain, will go to the OSAT players, packaging, so on and so forth. And then you need more equipment. So in my opinion, this is actually a great thing for a lot of semiconductor players. It will actually create a lot of demand for this technology equipment as well as services required along the value chain. Yeah. So mark my words, despite all the bad news is happening around, especially in Malaysia, right? So hopefully things start turning around. But I personally am quite optimistic about the outlook of semiconductor technology, specifically automotive electronics moving forward. So okay, let's move on. Otherwise, not much time for case studies later. Yeah, okay, it's 9 o'clock. Great, still on time. Now, then we talk a little bit about what are the innovations and trends happening around the automotive industry. So I wouldn't touch too much. I think most of you would know, the hot thing, the in thing right now talk about is actually autonomous driving, right? Then we've got 5G, then we've got electrification of the entire powertrain, artificial intelligence, GIS, human to machine interface, HMI, blockchain technology, 3D printing of parts, Internet of Things, so on and so forth, right? But if you break down all this, right, these are the 6 of the key trends that I personally am following, right? So I got this from one of the McKinsey reports. You can have a look at it as well. But basically, one of the key trends, one of the major trends in the automotive industry is actually the paradigm shift from horsepower to computing power. Now, I know previously, when we buy cars, right, we'll talk about how many cc's you get, how many horsepower, right? But in the future, it's all about computing power. Just like when we buy our computers, right? How many gigs or how much is how fast is your processor? How powerful are your processors, right? This is going to happen in the car industry as well. Mark my words, right? Then of course, we talk about IoT, the Internet of Things. It's going to come to the automotive industry as well. We are talking about V2V, vehicle to vehicle. We're talking about V2X, vehicle to anything at all. Then of course we got the circular economy. A lot of these talks around this. We talk about net zero emissions. A lot of countries are actually committing to achieve this, some as early as 2030. But I think most of the countries have their target set at, I think, as far as 2050, right, to achieve net zero emission. And in order to do that, cars being one of the major contributors, carbon dioxide, right? It will actually eventually have to move towards electrification, meaning less reliance on carbon, but more reliance on electronics. Yeah. Then we've got rise in the how we own cars in the future. These days, I mean, currently, right, and previously, when we think about ownership of a car, we think about buying a car, or whether it's from cash or from hire and purchase. But in the future, it could be based on subscription based, and this is actually a very interesting segment. I believe this will open up a lot of business opportunities in the future, right? So, Mark, I mean, you can track this closely. Then, of course, even the current, EVs, right? Electric vehicles are still based on the current platform architecture of a conventional car. Now, eventually, we believe also that the future cars will have their own dedicated platform. If you haven't heard before, there's this thing called the skateboard architecture. It's like the EV, the future EV, right? The architecture is really like a skateboard, a piece of board with 4 wheels and everything on top, right? So that's what they call the skateboard architecture. So I think eventually the EVs will have their own dedicated platforms, so that they can actually slowly shift away from the ICE, the internal combustion engine architecture. Then, of course, there's already a battle. Every time there's new technology, there's always at least 2 camps. Now, I personally am the believer. I believe that the camp of the BEV, the battery-powered electric vehicles, will win as compared to the other alternatives like FC. This is the hydrogen fuel cell EVs or hydrogen powered EVs, so on and so forth. Okay, so these are the major trends that I'm personally following. I believe if you can understand it, you can actually gauge where are the investment opportunities. Yeah. So these are another key trend that it's maybe a little bit too early to talk about, but I think it's good to mention here because we're talking about trends, right? So in the future, we believe that it's aligned with the EVs having their own dedicated platform. So the architecture will actually shift from distributed electronic components to a more centralized architecture. Now, as you can see here, the current model is if you want to have n number of functions, you've got to have n number of ECUs. ECUs stand for electronic controller units, right? Then in the future, where you have a domain base, so maybe you can group a few ECUs to one. So and then they call it zonal or domain architecture, many words. I mean, there are many terms for it, and this is happening right now. So we would need to use less ECUs for the same number of functions. But eventually, right, I personally believe that we will go towards a converged centralized architecture whereby you only need a bare minimum amount of ECUs that will control the same n functions in a car. Now, this is still highly debatable whether it is feasible or not, right? It is still very much debatable. So because this is something in the future, but mark my words, this should be the trend from distributed to zonal or domain architecture to eventually centralized. It may not happen in 2025, but I think eventually as EV become the mainstream, right, have their own dedicated platform, this should be the trend. Yeah. And so where are the investment opportunities, right? So especially when it comes to autonomous vehicle, so this is the basic value chain that I got from one of the reports by McKinsey. So there is, as usual, there are different segments: the hardware, the software, the back end, and the engineering services, which including validation, integration, from different brand owners. Okay, but I believe, as you can see from here, actually, if you want to look for really blue sky or lucrative business, right? Look at the boxes in blue. I hope you can see the color from your side. So this is potential focus area for specialized silicon, specialized semiconductor. So which actually are sensors, for LiDAR, for camera, for radar. Now, right now, there is a battle or competition whether which technology will eventually be the de facto technology when it comes to sensing for for autonomous driving. Now, previously, the bet was, a lot of the bets are put on LiDAR. All right. But recently, I think Elon Musk, who owns Tesla, he came out to say, hey, LiDAR is not good. It's not efficient. That cannot do what I want. So he's actually going back to the drawing board and looking at cameras, for his Tesla models. But other than the sensors, with actually the bigger chunk of the pie is actually on the compute platform. Now, this compute platform are the the IDMs or the suppliers that give all these chips, specialized chips that will power up, the autonomous vehicle. So imagine, when you have a phone, so you think about Qualcomm, you think about Huawei Kirin, right? Qualcomm Snapdragon, you have laptops, you think about Intel, you think about AMD, right? So when it comes to cars, we also have a few major players. In fact, a lot of these consumer players, like Nvidia, like Qualcomm, they have also ventured into the automotive compute platform many years ago. And in fact, they have a suite of products that support these autonomous driving as well. Pretty interesting. You can go and look at their website. So you've got Qualcomm, Nvidia, NXP, Renesas, and a lot of other different names, which are pretty new, even to me. But a lot of them actually are part of this thing called the AVC Consortium, which stands for, I think, Autonomous Vehicle Computing Consortium. You can go on to the website, avcconsortium.org, a lot of information there. Okay, so why I show this is actually to align your thought. Of course, there are a lot of investment opportunities, but not all of them are potentially the kind of investment opportunity that you want. So I think we can look at the green boxes because, according to McKinsey, this is a potential focus area. We can also look for strategic control points, the empty box with dark blue lines, but try to steer away from commodity with low attractiveness because this is usually the Red Sea and there'll be a lot of players around it, right? And it may be quite hard to make money, but it's still a good business. But just that maybe in terms of the investing angle, maybe not so good. Okay, so this is just what I want to talk about here. And moving forward, the next slide will talk about, where are the growth areas, because, even for semiconductors, automotive semiconductor, as I mentioned earlier on, is so diverse, right? So many components, so many modules. So this is an article derived from semiconductors.org and as well as strategy analytics. I compiled both articles together. So in terms of CAGR, compounding annual growth rate, the applications that will see a huge growth in the next 5 years, currently we're 2021, so we're in the middle of it, is actually related to safety, which is true. Actually, a lot of money is actually put into safety, not just the hardware, not just the electronics, not the software, but also on the regulatory side as well. Then, of course, powertrain is also one of the things that it's evolving in a big way. So naturally, it will attract a lot of investment. Driver infotainment, body cases, so on and so forth. They'll last. The next one. But the key here is actually, among applications driving semiconductor growth, advanced driver assistance system, or what we call ADAS, will have the largest increase. All right. As you can see here, if you look at it from a different component point of view, whether it's MCU, MPU, or memory, or power, electronics, or linear. So linear could be voltage regulators, could be linear chips, sensors, ASIC, application-specific ICs, optoelectronics, so on and so forth. So these are the top component space that will actually have the highest growth. So I think namely is MPU space or DSP SoC. These are digital signal processing. Just like what these are all the applications in the house under the compute platform. Just like I talk about power and memory. So these are the four the four semiconductor components I'll be looking at. All right, so who are the players you may be asking? Now, this is exactly the same slide that I shared earlier in my webinar. My earlier webinar, I think it's under Industrial Electronics or IIoT, right? It is exactly the same, and these are the same players, right? So Infineon, Renesas, NXP, ST Micro, Texas Instrument, Cypress, not in this picture. They're all the key major global players when it comes to automotive semiconductors, because this is a suite of products that they actually produce. So from MCU, MPUs to analog mixed signal sensors, RF connectivity, all the way to memories. All right, you can look at this. Right, then you may ask, hey, do I really need to invest in these companies? Because a lot of them are not listed in Malaysia. Most of them are listed either in US or in Europe. Not necessarily. In fact, a lot of these companies have a lot of production, a lot of plants in Malaysia, right? Especially Penang. So I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about some of these companies that actually support this global semiconductor value chain. Yeah. But before that, before we talk about case studies, I want to, as I mentioned before, perhaps allocate some time to talk about this thing called the NEV, New Energy Vehicles. Okay. So far, I hope you are with me. I promised Shane already I won't talk too fast. Okay. I hope I'm doing a good job as of now. As far as I'm concerned. Okay. What is NEV? NEV actually stands for New Energy Vehicle. Now, NEV is actually a term coined by the Chinese government, not recently, but 10 years ago. In fact, back in 2011, right? So the Chinese government has this dream, they want to invest in NEV. Actually, so you have to give. I fully respect the Chinese being Chinese. It's so hard to compete with them, right? In terms of business, in terms of thought process, right? 10 years ago, they already know, the consumer space is already so crowded, and we cannot compete with the Western world because they are so far ahead from us. And they know where are the areas that they need to compete, that they have advantage. And one of them is actually on automotive. Why? Because they have one of the largest automotive market in the world, right? And because of that as well, it created a lot of problem. And one of them is pollution. All right. So 10 years ago, they already decided they want to invest 100 billion renminbi, not small amount, 100 billion renminbi in the next 10 years to invest in this new energy vehicle program. And what are the factors that incentivize this program? Is actually, as I mentioned, it is related to environment pollution. The Chinese are actually very serious about, climate change, about, pollution. Notwithstanding whatever the Trump administration alluded before, right? I think those are just for drama effect. But their Chinese are really serious about this. If you have visited Shanghai or any cities in China a few years ago, right, you know that they are very serious in it. You visited China, any city in China 10, 15 years ago compared to today, right, it's so different. The skies are blue, in fact. And all these are actually efforts by the government to actually reduce pollution. And this is one of the main drivers for them to venture to NEV, because they want to reduce the automotive CO2 emissions. Now, secondly, they also found out, wow, in order for me to power my automotive, right, I need oil. And because China do not produce oil, they had to rely on other countries like the Middle East, countries like America, right? So they say, hey, this is a national security issue. So I need to find an alternative to actually wean my dependency on oil, something that is more sustainable. And they come up with the idea of NEV. That, of course, around that time, the trend of EV is just picking up. And the most important and the fourth factor, which I think is one of the major factors as well, is actually the readiness of the batteries. Now, the concept of EVs is not new. It has been around for many, many years. In fact, when the automotive first came about, there were already ideas to power up the cars using battery. But the problem was, yes, you can power up, but how do you carry the power? How do you carry the battery pack, because it's so bulky, right? So this needs to happen. The battery needs to go through a certain process to reach what it is today, in order to make it technically as well as economically or commercially viable for it to power the EVs. And that's what it is today. But when it comes to EVs, right, wow, there are so many terms. You got NEV, ICE, HEV, PEV, what are all these? It's very simple. Okay. Now, NEV, as I mentioned, is what we call new energy vehicle. Now, this is a term which is used in China, used by China, but NEV in America is a different thing. It's called neighborhood electric vehicles, entire different story. Now, ICE, as you know, is actually what we call the internal combustion engine. So the conventional cars we have are all ICEs. HEV stands for hybrid electric vehicles. So you need to understand this, because if you want to invest in automotive electronics, at least you need to understand what are some of the more common EV models out there, right? HEV it stands for hybrid electric vehicle. Now, hybrid vehicles cannot be charged by an external power source, meaning there is no power cable for you to plug on the wall socket to power up. No, how the HEVs power themselves is actually through kinetic energy from the rolling motion of the engine on the wheels that generate kinetic energy to power out the other components in the car. So that's HEV. Now, so REV, I just put there for fun because I saw Exora and Proton Preview, right? But what I want to focus on is actually the PEV. It's called a plug-in vehicle. Now, plug-in vehicle is actually a category which has two major EVs called the plug-in hybrid vehicle, PHEV, or the BEV, called the battery electric vehicle. Now, plug-in electric vehicle, PEV, is just a blanket term, as I mentioned, because a group, a category of EVs that they still use internal combustion engine, but they cannot be recharged as using external power supplies. All right, they can. This is why they call plug-in. So in this category, they got two: the plug-in hybrid, as I mentioned before. Pure hybrid cars cannot be recharged using external power supply, but the plug-in hybrid can. Okay, so and then the other end is actually the BEV, the battery electric vehicle. This is called all electric vehicle, and it is classed within this PEV, and it is only using pure electric to power the car, which means there are no ICE engine. There's just a motor, all right, an electric motor to drive the car. So the Tesla models fall under the BEV, but a lot of these hybrid plug-in EV vehicles out there are actually under this category as well. Okay. especially in China. China, PHEV is a huge thing, but in other countries like US and Europe, right, or other developed countries, actually VEB is the main EV models. Okay, excuse me. So in China, actually, the NEV sales are catching up, especially post-pandemic, as you can see here. You know, somehow the pandemic actually woke up a lot of people, say, hey, you know, instead of traveling using in public transport, right, I better have my own cars, right? So in that case, they don't really mind. They want something that is fuel savvy, right? All the better if it's electrical because it's so cheap, right? And in fact, the Chinese government incentivized the citizens to buy electronic cars by subsidizing, I think since I can't remember, 2016, all the way to 2020, they actually subsidized very heavily. In fact, it was cheaper for them to buy any sort of EV cars compared to a conventional car with ICE. But that subsidy has already been restructured in the phase 2 of the new NEV program. Which it means that actually the car makers like SAIC, GAC Group, Geely, NIO, XPeng, so on and so forth, they have got to produce more EVs for them to earn enough credits for them to produce their conventional cars. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, NEVs in China have driven growth due to increased local production and enhanced product diversity. And in fact, more and more players are coming into this, and with the attractive policies by the government as well, this is going to keep on growing, right? I believe this is the case. And with this, it's actually created a lot of new players, new business case, and not use case in the entire supply chain, whether it's upstream or downstream, right? Upstream from R&D that includes, the materials used for batteries. I'll talk a little bit about later. The different type of batteries, the motors, the control system, electronics. So all this require electronics, and that you can see the importance of automotive electronics moving forward. Then to production, to distribution, and then these are the more downstream portion. I want to highlight here perhaps is the one, as I mentioned before, is the vehicle ownership as well as the battery reuse. So now there are two camps in this NEV program. One camp is saying, in order for this to work, you need to have a supporting network of recharging stations, all right? And this is what's happening right now. Now, there's another camp, like from this place at NIO, they say, hey, instead of charging platform, I think it's better to do a subscription model whereby, you can come to my shop to exchange your old battery to a new battery right away, a fully recharged battery, then you can go on already. Right, so there are two camps of business models right now. Now, which one will eventually win? I really don't know right now, but let's see. But both have their pros and cons, right? So this is just to highlight actually the NEV industry creates a lot of value add services as well as players along the way. Okay, So I just want to talk about importance of battery, right? And for that, we need to talk about, what are the different types of charging available when it comes to EVs. This is the article extracted from SCMP. It says that one of the first advances the EV industry has made from on-the-go drivers is fast charging. Now, this is very important actually. Can you imagine if you drive an EV, right? Imagine in the future, Malaysia is developed already, then you drive EV anywhere on the road, right? Then you see, the battery indicator already very low. Then you drive your car to the charging station and you have to wait 2 hours to charge your battery, right? Doesn't happen that way, right? Because it doesn't make sense. So actually the fast charging is also one of the key, I would say, roadblock that they have to overcome or to achieve in order to make this viable. So we've got these 3 levels of charging. We've got called level 1, level 2, and level 3, which is the DC fast charge. All right. Now, of course, each of them have their own merits as well as disadvantages. Of course, fast charging sounds very good, sounds perfect, right? But there's this thing about the range as well. You can charge your battery up to maximum capacity in a very short time, but whether this power can hold in order for you to to power up your vehicle for a long range is another story. So there are many different metrics, technological metrics that you have to consider. All right, so these are, but basically it is categorized to level 1, 2, and 3. Now, so center of that is actually the battery. Battery is very important. How advanced, how powerful is your battery will determine how far your car can go, how long it will last, and how stable it will be. And that is why a great deal of research is being carried out to increase the capacity of the electric vehicles to help the cars go farther in a single charge. Now, when it comes to battery capacity, there's only one thing that is coming to play, which is the energy density. The energy density for batteries is measured in watt-hour per kilogram. Now, you may say, hey, of course, I want to have a battery that can last as long as possible and can help drive the car as far as possible. But it comes in a bulky 100 kilogram. Doesn't make sense, right? So there must be a balance that has to be struck, all right? So, of course, in the battery technologies, we've got mature technologies, we've got current technologies, and we've got future technologies, which is all measured based on the energy density. I'm sure most of you will know that actually the main material right now that power up a lot of batteries is actually lithium ion, right? And with that, actually Tesla has made a recent breakthrough. As you can see from the chart here, they claim that their batteries, I think it was the 4680. By the way, they recently took over the Panasonic, all the Panasonic giga factories that they produce the battery, right? The Tesla battery. But this is one component battery, right? So it doesn't mean that the one whole car is powered by this single battery. No, actually, all this battery is packed into a battery pack. Just like the solar power that they will be put into a car to power up the car. Okay. Excuse me. So they recently bought over the Panasonic, all the Panasonic technology as well as production. So they claim that they kind to have a 240 watt-hour per kilogram kind of energy density. But is it the end game? No, actually. In order to have more viable further range, driving range, can last longer and more power, right? Can pack more energy. Actually, this is just a starting point. In fact, in the future technologies, we're talking about 400, 600, 900 watt-hour per kilogram. And in order for us to achieve that, I personally believe the current lithium ion or any sort of battery that uses either lithium or all these raw materials will not be able to cut it. I believe to achieve this kind of specs, we need solid state batteries. All right. Now, what is the difference between solid state and the current batteries? Current batteries are usually use a lot of liquid as electrolytes to conduct the cathodes and anodes, right? Solid state will do without this liquid, so it's more stable. They maybe use other type components like ceramics, as the medium, just like what happened, just what I talked about earlier on. So this could happen, but not so soon. Now, who are the major players? CATL, BYD, LG Chem, CALB. By the way, CATL, BYD, CALB are all Chinese companies. So the Chinese players actually dominate 70% of the market already. Then Gotion is American, Panasonic now is owned by Tesla. So these are the battery players to look out for if this is your kind of investment thesis that you're eyeing for. Okay, but so with that, I talk about what are the trends in the automotive semiconductor. We talk about NEV, new energy vehicle, that is actually driving the demand for automotive electronics. And then we talk about the importance of the battery that will actually influence how it is charged, how fast it can be charged. So then we move on to the case studies in Bursa Malaysia. Now, there are a lot of companies in Malaysia, in KLSE, listed in KLSE, that are involved in the supply chain. It's impossible for me to talk about all of them, and to tell the truth, I do not know all of them. I can share with you about the companies that I know, that I personally invest in. So disclaimer there, whatever I talk about The reason why I know about this company is because I personally invest in them, and therefore I did a lot of research in these companies. So tonight we're going to talk about 3+1. So I mask this out just for dramatic effect. All right, I think some of these names you already know. Unisem I talked about before, so I'm going to revisit about Unisem. Great Tech is a new company that I want to talk about, and MPI I have talked about in the first installment of Automotive Electronics as well. So let's talk a little bit about some updates of Unisem. I'm not going to go through the background, but basically Unisem is one of the largest OSAT companies in Malaysia. OSAT stands for outsourced semiconductor and testing. Excuse me. But the problem with Unisem is automotive is not their major revenue contributor, as is seen from here. All right, the black bars are actually from automotive segment. The major segment, so the major revenue comes from consumer, PC, as well as industrial electronics, yeah, as well as communication. But I do see this as upside. The potential, if they banking on the right clients, they should be able to grow this part as well. So among the notable clients across the globe, like Skyworks, Quovo, these are more for communication, and then Texas Instrument, Dialog. Actually, these two among the automotive clients are monolithic power systems, MPS or Swindon. MPS is based in US and Swindon is based in UK, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about these two companies. Now, MPS is not a big company. I think the market cap in NASDAQ is about 17 billion recently. But they are a very special company because they provide high performance semiconductor-based power electronics. All right. They've got a huge suite of products, not just electronics, not just automotive, but for the automotive products, they are actually all AEC-Q grade. Now, AEC-Q means Automotive Electronics Council quality. Just like our SIRIM, all their electronics, all their products in this automotive segment are all stamped by this AEC quality chop. Right, so they supply things like switching, power converters, these voltage regulators. This is what we call low dropout regulators, switching equipment, motor drivers, power modules, backlight LEDs, so on and so forth. And all these are used for application like ADAS. I mentioned ADAS before. Digital cockpit, so this is for the digital infotainment segment, as well as external lighting. Okay, and MPS, again, they didn't start off with automotive straight away. In fact, along the years since listing, right, they went from PC to consumer devices to smartphones to automotive recently. So as long as Unisem can follow through and partake in this growth, right, they should do pretty well as well. Okay, now next is this company called Swindon, based in UK. They are slightly different from this MPS just now. Now, Swindon is a specialist when it comes to ASIC, application-specific ICs, and they specialize in MEMS, pressure sensor, and pressure sensors. Now, TPMS is actually tire pressure management system. Now, in the future car, it's going to be so smart. Everything will have a sensor. Everything will have, you don't even have to worry about if your car is in a good condition, because the computer system will tell you whether is well enough or something needs to be changed. And in this regard, Swindon, they specialize in two things. One is the pressure management system, and the other thing is the battery management system. As you can see here, actually, the MEMS pressure sensor market, right? Automotive is the biggest driver. Not too much about consumer, but a lot of industrial as well as medical, because all this, logically, they need to use to measure pressure, different type of pressure. But for automotive, it is particularly important. All right. So Swindon is a specialist for MEMS as well as battery management. So when it comes to battery management, they have this specialty product called the ASIC. They actually they can incorporate, functions like, to monitor what is the lifespan of your power, your battery cells, temperature control, pressure monitor, signal conditioning, so on and so forth. So they specialize in this as well. Now, I am not entirely sure which components Unisem is supplying to them, but having these customers listed as their some of the major clientele, I'm sure they are in part of this value chain. Okay. Now, of course, when you talk about Unisem, we cannot not talk about MPI, because in terms of quantum, MPI derives a much bigger chunk of revenue from their automotive business. As you can see here, Unisem derives about, I would say, slightly more than 10 million US dollar per quarter. Here. So say 15 million per quarter. So 1 year is about 60 million US dollars. So you multiply that by 5, that's about 300 million ringgit for automotive segment. But in Unisem, that's more than double of it. Why? Sorry about that. Let me sip a coffee first. Yeah. So Unisem derives close to 800 million or even more ringgit in revenue from automotive segment. In fact,
MPI, right?
Yeah. Sorry?
MPI, right?
Yeah, this MPI. Yeah, sorry about that. This MPI. So MPI is a bigger player when it comes to automotive electronics. Yeah, and they have two companies, Carlson and Dynacraft. Dynacraft is a lead packaging, lead frame supplier, whereas Carlson is an offset. Now Carlson is almost 50 years old company, older than me. They are one of the biggest names in the world, not just in Malaysia. And one of the major segments is actually automotive. Now, of course, I'm not going to talk too much about the background, but a lot of emphasis is put on automotive recently, other than 5G, other than communication. But a lot of emphasis is put on power management, automotive sensors, right? Sensors for automotive, power management for cloud server farms, power management for automotive as well in the moving forward. That's why they are quite serious in this. In fact, based on their latest this analyst briefing, right? I think this is back in Q3, financial year 2021, just recently. They actually have a special one slide to talk about, the automotive segment. So these are the major trends that they show, electrification, autonomous driving, connectivity. These are all the things that we talked about in the previous automotive semiconductor webinar, right? And this just show that actually, MPI is also in this. So they are involved in MEMS and sensors. I talk about, they call it the sensorization wave. Also, again, just like what I talk about Swindon as well as the MPS, they talk about pressure sensors. They talk about advanced packaging of this material of these chips. The SiP modules, pressure sensing applications, radar, which is used for ADAS. They've got power packaging as well. QFN is actually one of the major products because of, I talk about Dynacraft. They specialize in debur as well, when you do a lot of, especially when there are a lot of CNC machining, right? There are a lot of these small etches, which is not good for, for EMI, which will cause a lot of interference, right? So you got to do this deburring or smoothing effect. So they specialize in this as well. And they also mentioned, they are under qualification for a new US and EU customer. They also specialize, they also focus a lot on SiC and GaN, which is silicon carbide, as well as gallium nitrate as alternative to silicon, which is very much relevant to the power management chips. I talked about this in the previous webinar already. So if this is new to you, please try to look out for these YouTube links available by LiveChamp. Yeah. So these are the things they are focusing on when it comes to automotive segment, and I believe that they will grow. In fact, their automotive is actually a major contributor already. I believe this segment will even grow further, with all the trends that I talk about, especially with the growth coming from China. Okay, so this is about MPI. MPI Unisem are basically just a touch point, just update to you. They are not new case studies. The new case study I want to talk about is actually this company called Great Tech. Now, interestingly, Great Tech, the market cap is almost the same as MPI, even though they are a fairly new company. So you can guess how sensational this business is. In fact, we at Spiral Thinker, we have been following Great Tech since IPO. We even attended the first briefing by the management, right? We went to visit the factories. That time, we didn't really see the potential into this automotive electronics part. We only saw the solar part. So our bad, right, for not uncovering this gem since then. So it is a big miss for us, but it is still good to talk about this company because their positioning into NAV is a new thing. Traditionally, their business rely a lot on solar. I think recently with some of the announcement that I'm going to share a bit later, they're actually venturing into this automotive as well. So as you can see here, so they got two main products, which are production line system, which is basically like end-to-end, a full range of automation when it comes of production line. Then we got the single-use automation equipment, like more of a modular. All right. So these are the two major products. PLS or power line systems are the major contributor, as you can see in 2020 and even in 2019, the main revenue contributor. SAE and other parts and services are just, I think, not the major ones. I think it should be below 10%, even 5%, but the PLS should be more than 90%. So what are the countries, what are the markets that they serve? They serve a lot in Asia as well as America. Now, previously, they served mostly America, but now because of the investment of solar from First Solar is their major customer when it comes to the renewable energy. So there are a lot of activities happening in this part of the world, especially in Malaysia. That's why their contribution from the revenue jumped from I think 80%. I forgot to put out the absolute number, but it's just a huge jump to 210 million. Oh, sorry, here it is. In 2019, their Asia contributed 62 million and jumped to 210 million in 2020. Huge jump, right? Whereas the America side, it reduced because a lot of capacity are being shifted here. So although this is not related to automotive electronics, but I think it is important for me to talk a little bit about the solar. One of the reasons why Great Tech is enjoying huge growth in solar is because of First Solar's business strategy to actually increase the capacity in Asia. So I think last year their solar revenue jumped over 200%, right? 210 million because of solar's ramping up their capacities in Asia, especially in Malaysia. So in fact, in 2020, there's a huge jump. I think it's going to normalize in 2022. So the management actually is quite smart. Mr. E.K. Tan is one of the founders. So he said, hey, if I want to grow this company right after IPO, I cannot rely on solar. That is why he is actually very enterprising. He's looking at other segments like medical, like these are EVs, right? And I think he struck gold, I think sometime last year, when they clinched an order from Lordstown Motor Corp, LMC. Now LMC is a JV between Lordstown and this General Motors GM. So I'm just going to maybe zoom in a little bit for you to see here. Okay, so this Lordstown or LMC is a pure EV player. They are not in the passenger vehicle segment. They are in the electrical truck segment. Wow, truck also got EV. Yeah. So again, like I mentioned, they've got their own skateboard cases design. I talk about EVs eventually will have their own dedicated platform, right? So this is one of the examples because this is a pure EV player. Of course, they'll be using other GM components, including airbags, so on. Right? But what I want to point out here is actually here. Now, this is from the IPO presentation. You can get it from the SEC website. So they even, you see, they even hired Great Tech as one of their integration, plant integrator supplier. So which means Great Tech supply a lot of this automation. Remember, Great Tech has two main products, PLS, which is the product line system, as well as the SAE, single automation equipment, right? So Great Tech actually supply a lot of this PLS, I believe should be PLS, to the general assembly line as well. So it is actually, Great Tech plays a very important role in Lordstown because you see, according to the amount, to the key critical milestones, sometime not too soon, not too far ahead in September 21 is where they are going to begin the production ramp up, meaning they have gone through this beta build, this pre-production stage already. All right, so they're going to go through the real commercial production right now, and that is why automation, these plants are very important. Okay, and of course, this company is not without sensational news. Lately, is this research company, I think this is a shorting firm called Hindenburg, that accused that GM supported the false bookings made by Lordstown. So of course, there was concern that Lordstown may not pay Great Tech eventually, because right now, as based on the latest standing, right, Great Tech has a outstanding order of 250 million ringgit Malaysia scheduled. All right, so they're afraid that this may not be honored. This is a huge amount, which I'll show you later. But of course, Great Tech management has come out and downplayed the concern and say that Lordstown has laid out a clear production plan that kicks off sometime in third quarter, as mentioned here, which underscore the importance of Great Tech, meaning Lordstown really cannot do without Great Tech's assembly line or machines. Yeah. So whether it happens or not, I really don't know. It remains to be seen. I hope that Lordstown is able to, keep up with their milestones. Otherwise, may not be so good to their suppliers, including Great Tech. Now, what is interesting about Great Tech is, although this is a fairly new company, right, but their financials are damn strong, I must admit, right? So as I mentioned, the order book on hand, based on their latest numbers, actually they have about close to 300 million. Here, as you can see, 300 million. Wow, if this is true, 250 million, that's a lot, which means that actually a lot of the order books is coming from the EV side. Now, but other than that, this company is net cash, by the way. Their share price is about 6 ringgit now, and their net cash per share, based on the Maybank report back in I think this is wrong. This should be 2020 November. Sorry, typo. They estimated this company should have about close to 1 ringgit, 90 cents to 1 ringgit worth of net cash per share. And you can see that actually this company is very good in generating free cash flow, which means that they don't really need to pour out a lot of capex, to build plants or to build new machines, right? A lot of them, I believe, maybe a lot of technologies are owned by the end clients. They just, like I mentioned, they are the integrator, all right, for the assembly lines. But I'm sure, if not the IP, they at least need to know the technology well, the processes well, in order for them to supply to their clients. Okay. So based on our channel checks, a lot of analysts and a lot of fund managers are looking at 500, 600 million net profit, revenue in the future, and then with a targeted net profit of close to 200 million in 2022, which basically puts the market cap at about 40 times forward PE. Now, whether this is cheap or expensive, if you ask me later on, I'm sure there'll be questions about this. It's pretty much subjective. Now, I believe if they can, do a good job with this Lordstown Motors crop, and kick off with, especially with this product, this commercial production, right? I'm sure it will be very good for Great Tech, and I'm sure that they will attract a lot of new customers moving forward. So, investing is really a lot looking about future. But if you ask me, based on the current earnings, of course, this is a very stretched valuation already. Yeah. So you got to weigh against, the valuation, whether it is fair right now, or you want to wait for, a better price or better valuation. I think recently, just today, right, a lot of tech stocks has gone up, including Great Tech. Yeah. So now that's about Great Tech. So that's put aside already. The last and final company, wow, Shane also shocked. Wow, David, you also want to talk about this company, because the share price has been going up sensationally, right? When we first looked at this company, it was around 7 ringgit. Today, I think it was 18 ringgit, right? So about more than 2 times in less than 1 month. It's crazy, right? Now, one of the things that actually, you see, when this report was out by CIMB on this company called Genetec, 28th of June, the price was 7 ringgit 20 cent. Ladies and gentlemen, June 28th, 7 ringgit 20 cent. Now, if you're on your computer or on your smartphone right now, please go and Google what Genetec's price right now. It's 18 ringgit. Okay. Now, what happened? In fact, Genetec also received a UMA, unusual market activity query from Bursa Malaysia, which they responded, as well on the same night. I believe one of the things, before I talk about this, so what is Genetec? Genetec is listed on the ACE market, not even on the main market, right? They are a engineering service provider. They are, let me see, they are involved in the design works of automation system, as well, just like Great Tech. They customize a lot of automated equipment and integrated systems, as a lot of things like Great Tech. But they are quite diversified. They are, other than automotive, they are also in the hard disk, electronics, pharmaceuticals, as well as other semiconductor and home appliances. But what happened was, in the past few years, they invested heavily into the R&D towards the automotive segment. That is why, if you look at their financials, right, in the past 2-3 years, their financials are actually quite poor, especially if you look at the bottom line as well as the cash flow. Because management is take a decision not to capitalize their R&D costs, so everything is just passed through. It's not captured into their balance sheet or on their financials. That's why a lot of them are expensed out, right? And that eats into their bottom line as well as the cash flow. So, but what led to the sensational rise recently is because, of this notion that Great Tech is riding on the EV manufacturers' plans. Now, although the end customer name is not mentioned in any of this report, but you can guess between the line. So I can read out for you. Genetec is confident it can benefit from the growing demand for EV vehicles worldwide. So according to a leading North American EV manufacturer, it plans to expand its EV battery production capacity and commission new factories in Europe and North America. Talk about Battery Day presentation in 2020, So you can Google which EV manufacturer in US actually has a Battery Day presentation. During this presentation back in 2020, this company plans to increase its annual battery production to 100 gigawatt hour per year in 2022 and move on to 3 terawatt hour in 2030. Wow. And to build 20 million EVs by 2030. So I guess you can roughly guess which company we're talking about. I can't name it, but you can guess it. So by the way, this report is produced by 2 analysts, Mr. Walter Au, I have high respect to him, as well as Mr. Shanas, also a very good analyst. Yeah. So Genetec's capabilities, they provide automation assembly solutions. So the focus now is actually on the automotive segment, yeah. Then they've got other things like aluminum profiling, testing, retooling, precision jigs and fixtures, machining, so on and so forth. Yeah. So basically, they are in the automation business, and their growth right now, the story is they are actually latched on the EV or the NEV growth, specifically this North American company. So whether it's cheap or whether it's overly overpriced now, I really don't know, because this is just the beginning. If this is true, I believe there are more things to come for this customer lah. All right. But again, any business there'll be risks because if their future is actually too much dependent on one single customer, then of course it's a huge business risk there, right? But I personally believe there is a lot of things. I think good things looking forward for this company. I'll be interested to follow this company through to see how far they can go. Okay, so that wraps out my presentation tonight. I hope it's not fast. What time is it now? Wow, 9:52. Okay, but I hope it's interesting because Spiral Thinker, FR Thinker, we try to give as many case studies as possible rather than the grandmother stories. Yeah, Shane, back to you. I hope the audience are still awake.
Yes, thank you so much, David. So now you know why every time I meet David, right, I have constant headache. Because my mind will be expanded. So once my mind got expanded, right, it never shrink one. Okay, do you agree? All right. So yes, thank you so much, David, for your very insightful session on telling us the automotive trend and also the overview and what are the upcoming opportunities in automotive supply chain. And also we go through the case studies for 4 companies here listed on Bursa Malaysia. So of course, due to time constraint, we can only address, let's say, I think 3 questions. David, is there any questions that you have, you want to address? Looks
I
like we got
haven't.
very...
I saw a lot of messages. I'm
Okay.
trying to go through. Maybe you can help to moderate, Shane.
Okay
I'm
lah.
sorry. Yeah.
I think this is very interesting. I also noticed that. Okay, now in your previous talk, right? This is asked by Andy Chi. You mentioned that you didn't really like Great Tech due to some issue that you can't mention. So why is that a change of mind?
Not sure whether this is the right platform to talk about, but I can tell you that the whatever it is actually falls down to my lack of clarity when it comes to the business. Because when we visited the plant, my mind was too much focused on the solar segment. And although the founder that time, he talked a lot about very exciting, new business, including the smart glass, talk about even the glass can be smart, and then talk about medical, excuse me, talk about advanced packaging like heterogeneous packaging. This is all very advanced technology. I was thinking, hey, Mr. Tan, my mind, my heart was asking, do you have the right people to do it? Do you have the right people to drive this business? Because it's a new company. So I to my own detriment, I put this company aside for a while. Then the share price kept on going up. And Great Tech is not the only one. Actually, the other company is called UWC, right? I also missed it. But because of their Great Tech's venture into the EV recently, which actually, I personally feel that, this is getting interesting because now I know that they do not really rely on one industry. They do not rely on one single major customer, which is First Solar. Now they've got other ventures as well. So I think that is what triggered my change in opinion, right? I have not talked to Mr. EK Tan recently, ever since the IPO, because I think he's very busy right now. But I hope I get to meet the management again. So probably next time when I have more updates, I can come back to Live Champ to talk about the development in the business. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. The next question is by Raj Kumar Pariyanan. During your previous presentation, you mentioned that KESM will turn around when the supply of chips to automotive industry recovers. Do you still maintain the same consistent view?
Yes, I still maintain because you see, for business like KSM, you have to really look at what their end customers are doing. Now, although they do not publicly make know who their customers are, but I'm pretty sure some of the key customers include NXP because if you drive along the Federal Highway, right, KESM factory is actually next to the NXP already. Now, the nature of business, it is better for them to be physically near the customer because they do a lot of burn-in chips, right? And there are a lot of communication as well as physical movement of their chips that of their what we call the device under test DUT. So NXP should be one of their customer. STI Micro is also. I'm sure that you can remember from a previous slide. Both of these are listed as the major automotive semiconductors. Now, why they are not picking up? I think it has a lot to do with the Chinese market. As I mentioned before, previously the automotive market in China, it is actually cheaper to buy an EV compared to a conventional car. And in China, the local players are really dominating the market. I mentioned a few names, right? Like GAC, SAIC, they have got BAIC, they've got Geely, so on and so forth, right? So these are the brands that are actually taking over the market. Now, whether whether the other brands that NXP supply to, whether they can catch up, I don't know. I seriously don't know. But specifically to KESM, what I'll be watching out for, as I mentioned before, is really on the capex. Lucky or not, this may not be your kind of business, but KESM's business is actually pretty capital intensive, which means that if actually they want to to generate, they want to increase the revenue, right? They have to spend a lot. Although a lot of some of the machines are being consigned by the end customer, right? But I believe they also need to spend a lot to actually retrofit or to actually own their own burn-in machines as well. So definitely, I'm still following this company very closely, KSM. I believe that in the potential. And to Raj Kumar, if you're interested in KSM, I also suggest to you to follow this company called Sunride, which is listed in SGX. Now, you don't have to invest in it. You can go to the website because there are a lot of materials, especially on the IR on the website. Sunride, SUNRIGHT. Okay, Shane?
All right. So the next question is by Angelina. Recently, Inari was invited to speak at the Bursa
Bursa
Marketplace
Malaysia.
Fair, right?
Yeah.
And then they mentioned that they are venturing into automotive industry. Would you give some opinion and comment?
Well, I think they have to. I'm very glad. I'm an Inari shareholder as well, and in fact, I attended their briefing today because of the private placement. I'm very interested that I'm very glad that they finally are also talking about automotive because Inari being for the fact that their major customer is Broadcom, which actually are very much involved in communications, consumer devices, fiber optics, right? So what Inari has been doing in the past couple of years is actually they have been diversifying their customer base. They've got this new plant P34, then P55 recently, right? It's actually to cater to new customers. So without going to specifics, Angeline, I'm very excited about this Inari venturing to automotive. And if you attended the Bursa webinar that day, right? I'm sure you felt that Casey was very upbeat in the company outlook. Now, I don't think Mr. Lau is anyone who will simply say things. So I believe in order for him to say, to give such positive outlook on the company, right? I'm sure a lot of plans are being laid out and being executed. So automotive being one of the segment, I'm very glad because if they miss this wave out, right, I think it's very hard for them to catch on to the competition already.
Yeah, actually, I was there also during his presentation.
Yeah. So how do you feel, Shane?
Yeah, I think it was very upbeat about the future
right?
growth.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's do one more question by
Yeah,
Mr.
great,
Yap,
great.
which is just now I mentioned about Ajinomoto and ABF, right? So just the question is it under Ajinomoto Malaysia?
No. I mentioned already. It is under the Japanese HQ.
The headquarter.
Yeah, headquarter. I think they spin off already. I'm not quite sure. No. Still under Ajinomoto because they have the ABF. But I think the engineers have come out to set up their own companies. Yeah. Now, that being said, word of caution, semiconductors is always evolving. There's always new technologies coming on, right? Although ABF is enjoying that special role right now, and Ajinomoto is enjoying that special monopoly, right? I believe in the future it will break off this monopoly. Why? The current core shortage just really opened people's eyes. Hey, I can have all the capacities in the world to build my wafers, to build my packaging, right? But if there's a bottleneck on the substrate, right, also gone. So I believe that the semiconductor supply chain, the major players, they will start looking for alternatives to the ABF if they have not already done so. So that is my caution if you're thinking of pursuing this as an investment thesis. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, David, for
Right.
doing this engaging Q&A session. So let me just go to my slide. Okay, hang on. Yeah. All right, so let me tell you more about our next webinar, which is happening on this Friday, which is going to be on the topic of build a global portfolio with Sharia compliant ETF. So it's happening on 16 July 2021, 8:30 to 10 o'clock. Yeah, please, the registration link has been given in the chat group. Yeah, please, and also in the YouTube live chat, so you can click it to register for this next session. So it will be conducted by me, yours truly. Okay, so I'll be a speaker for this next session. So yeah, thank you so much, David, who is the founder of Spiral Thinker Group, to join us
Thank
in
you very
this.
much for having me. I hope your participants again great insights tonight.
All right. So if this has been helpful to you, if this is also equally mind blown to you, type 1. Okay, let us know. Type 1 if this is helpful to you.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah.
Please take good extra care because especially in Selangor, the cases are mind blowing. And a lot of I think there was a virologist expert that came out to say that it's going to go to 20,000. So let's prepare for that. Just stay safe, please. Let's work together to break the chain.
Yeah, I think many of you, wow, I think we have easily 100 over likes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. Thank you very much.
Yeah, COVID number has seen no resistance, all resistance, all broken already. So the breakout is really strong.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
So stay safe, everybody, and have a great rest of the day. Okay,
Good
bye
night.
bye. See you on Friday.